Gives me this thing.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Second Line Show. I'm your host, Nola Nash. Let's let the good times roll. I love our music.
I do too.
Yeah. Welcome to the show. I am Nola Nash. I am your host. Welcome to this special Tuesday edition of the Second Line Show. And have we got a treat for you this Halloween week? We are talking to Jennifer Graeser Dornbush, Dornbush, where did I get that? Dornbush, who has got some really cool background for you guys about what she does, how she got here, and how she grew up a coroner's kid and is now writing murder mysteries and forensic science stuff. So much cool stuff. We were showing off our dolls. We brought dolls today. So we've already been having some good times before we even get on the show, which I love to do with the guests. Annie McDonald is going to join us tonight, but you guys know oftentimes Annie's got a lot going on health-wise. And so big shout out to Annie, who wishes she was here tonight. And I know that she will be watching. So Annie, we love you. We miss you. And we do wish you were here. Wishing you all the best tonight. And we will try to make this a fantastic show for you to watch later. We love you. All right. So you guys know the deal. So as we are talking, make sure that you're posting your comments and we will get to as many of those as we can. We'll work them into our discussion. I know you guys are going to have some great questions for Jennifer as we go. Trust me, you are going to enjoy this one. You guys know my penchant for the macabre, and so I'm really enjoying this. This is going to be so much fun. All right. So, Jennifer, I'm going to let you tell your background. Tell the viewers who you are, what they need to know about you. Give them a tease a little bit, and then we'll break this down a little bit further. So I know you've got so many things that you have done, and we're going to talk about how you got from point A to point Q, or whatever point you're at now, because I know you've done a lot of things and come a long way.
There's a long way to go.
Yes.
All right. So I'll give it to you in snippets because there is a lot we can unpack, and I don't want to over talk the show. But so I'm Jennifer Dornbush, and I'm a native of Michigan, northern Michigan. I grew up in a little town called Fremont, Michigan, which is home of the Gerber baby food, which we are very proud of.
Yes.
And anyways, so in that West Michigan community, my father was medical examiner for 3 counties for over about 25 years. And the office for the medical examiner was in our house. So I literally grew up around death and dead bodies. And I did my first case when I was 8. And,
oh my gosh.
Yep. And yeah, so I grew up around forensic science, and it was a sort of, I guess, a family business. And that was the genesis of me becoming a crime and mystery writer.
So I know, just because I've done some research on you. You had body parts in your freezer as a kid. Like your dad brought, if the office was there, like work was at home. And so you're a kid, you're growing up, there's body parts in your freezer. Is this like move the hand out of the way so you can get the pork chops out to thaw, or was it in its own freezer? How did the writer in me is going, picture this scene.
Yeah.
Like how is young Jennifer dealing with the body parts in her freezer?
And the OSHA and everybody else is like, that is really weird. What is happening here? So yes,
that is not how it's done.
That's not right. That's not code. That's not to code. So let me unpack a little bit of this. So first of all, the death investigation system in our country is a very unregulated system. And we have to understand that and know that first, because that will make all of this have more sense to it. So there's a difference between coroners and medical examiners. Some states and counties are coroner run, some are medical examiner run, and it really depends state by state, county by county. In Michigan, we are blessed to have a medical examiner state and a medical examiner system, which means it's more regulated because medical examiners have to be medical doctors and have to have a medical degree, whereas coroners don't. So my dad was a doctor. He had his own practice, his own general practice, and he was also a forensic pathologist. So he had all the proper medical regulated training for this. And so it wasn't just, slapping things together. He literally there was a rhyme and reason to this. It was all up to code, so to speak. However, our county, now this is where counties vary a lot. Like what you're going to see on like your CSIs and your TV shows and all that, it's glitz and glamour, and it looks like they have all the best and greatest equipment, and that could not be further from the truth for most counties, and not only 30 years ago when I was growing up, but also now today. There's a big discrepancy. There's a lot of lack of funding. So all that, just to give you the boring background about.
No, that's not boring at all.
Is in our county. By the way, New Orleans has a great system. Just FYI, you guys have a great system. So
they've got a lot of bodies to keep up with. They need a great system.
Yeah, they had to do something, right? So in our rural counties, because he was medical examiner for 3 counties, the counties were rural and they weren't that well funded, quite honestly. We don't have a very, where I came from was a rather middle class to underserved county financially. And so there wasn't money for a medical examiner's office per se. There wasn't a place to store the records, or when you do autopsies, you store pieces of that body because you might need them later. There wasn't a place for that. So, which is honestly not uncommon.
Really?
So yeah, I mean, it's probably, I shouldn't say that. It's just probably more, how do I say it? My dad was very unorthodox in how he did things. He liked to save the county money, and he was also very particular in how he examined deaths. You aren't going to find that kind of rigor in every single county, but he wanted to make sure that he kept great records and kept control and chain of custody of things that were happening with death investigation. So he took, and this was like, way back before forensics was even popular or a thing. I mean, it was way pre-CSI, way before it was cool.
So he didn't have the shades, like the Miami guy.
more geeky, more Quincy like.
Quincy. Hey, there's nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that.
Hey, Deborah King.
Hi. And so he decided, he and my mom, because my mom helped with sort of the office part of things, they said, we're going to keep all the records. We're going to keep all the medical records, the death investigation records. We're going to keep the financial records. The whole operation is going to operate out of my house because I trust it and I'm going to do it right. And I'm going to save the county money.
Totally get that.
Yeah, so they did. So everything was stored there, right down to little tissue slides. He would make slides from tissue, blood samples. We had an extra fridge in our basement that stored blood samples. The freezer. Look, getting back to your freezer question, Nola. The freezer, yes. So we had, as any decent, self-respecting Midwesterner, we had a big chest freezer in our basement, and on the top shelf was our ground beef and our frozen corn and, the apples we froze so we could make pies later. But the lower level were the kidneys, the hearts, the pancreas, the livers. Yeah.
So don't throw out the wrong thing. I'm glad you had a system. That would have been really unfortunate.
If it has a person's name on it, it's not.
Don't throw it out.
It's not. No, don't throw that out. No.
So, oh my gosh.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy when I think of it now. He even developed his own film back in the day because he was shooting, of course, on 35 millimeter and he had his own developing setup. That he would develop his own film from the scenes. And yeah, it was he's a one-stop shop. I learned a ton. I mean,
I can imagine. I mean, and I love that, telling the story about your first case, you're working your first case at 8 years old. And I've read it was a plane crash, correct?
Yeah.
And to have your dad say, let's go out, let's do this. And to take you along at 8 years old and say, you know, this is the family business. This is what we're doing. I'm going to, taking you out as a kid and trusting you with that as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
When I was 8 years old, I can't imagine my dad saying, let's, we're going to go investigate a plane crash. I mean, totally would not happen. That was so cool of your dad to take you out there. But what was that like as a kid, going out and, picking up brains off the ground, or whatever you were doing that you were helping your dad with?
I know, it's funny. I honestly don't remember how I felt, because right, you're a kid and your parents say do this, you do that, you just this is what we do. So it's funny because I don't remember having like particular thoughts or feelings toward it at all. It was just how we grew up. It was just, there's an autopsy report sitting on the kitchen table and pictures, from the autopsy. Oh, because dad just set it there on his way through the kitchen or whatever. Or he would videotape autopsies too, sometimes for records. And then, with the old VHS, and then he would transfer and copy them on our system at home, because that was and it'd be like running on our family TV. Like, when you would copy it in the old school way, you would have to play. You couldn't just fast forward, like you had to play through the whole thing to copy it. And it would just be running on the television, and I'd be like, Dad, come on, I'm trying to do my homework, or like there's friends over or whatever, like.
That was going to be my next question. Did you actually have friends come and sleep over? Or were they like, no?
All the time. We always had friends over, and family. And I, again, didn't think anything of it. And so I didn't talk to my friends about it. It's kind of like if your father's a plumber, you know what he does. You've seen him fix things, but you don't talk to your friends about it. Like, why would you talk to your friends about it? My dad said, yes, so. It was kind of like that. Like, I didn't think that it was anything different or special or unusual for a long time. Like, until probably I was like a preteen. And then you're like, oh, wait, everybody's family doesn't do this? Like, you don't have blood in your freezer? Or you're like so
not.
Wait,
these are not the Hot Pockets.
No, don't eat those. Yeah. No, but I do remember this one instance when I was young, like probably I think it was like 3rd grade, and I went to a really small school, and we had a new girl in class that year. It was just like 25 students in our class, and we had gone to school with each other since kindergarten, and now there's a new girl in the class. So and she was the principal's daughter. So, everybody wants to be friends with the new girl. And so I had her over one time, and we have a barn. And in the barn, there's like lofts that face each other. So like you can go up either side, and one side was our loft, like the kids' loft. And so like my sisters and I, we had our little table and chairs and our books and our tea sets, and we had our games, and that was like our special loft where we got to go and play. And so we were up there playing one day after school, and she looks over, there were these rails, that look over to the floor. And she's like, looks at this big 55-gallon drum that's sitting in the middle of the barn floor. And she's like, that's interesting. What's that? And this is like a city girl, right? She had moved from the city to our small town, and like, country living kind of thing.
Yeah.
So these were all like new experiences for her. What's in that? What is that thing? What's in that thing? I said, well, and I knew exactly what was in that thing. I was like horrified that she asked and was certainly not going to bring it up, because what was in that 55-gallon drum was a man's leg.
Oh, God.
Yes.
This is not first time with a new friend conversation.
No. I'm like, darn it. Like, why did she have to ask about that? So she kind of was on it. And I was like, all right, fine. Like, it's this, she's like, what? I'm like, yeah. And of course I didn't really understand why the leg was in the barn. I knew it had to do with my dad's work, and it was something he was saving because he needed it for records. Or I think it turned out later that it was maybe, I I think it was a homicide case or a potential homicide case or accidental homicide, something very questionable death. And so we had to keep it because you need to keep things at least, I think, up to 7 years legally. So he had to keep, because somehow it was evidence.
He had to keep a leg for 7 years in a drum?
Yeah, it might have been longer. But yeah, for sure 7 years. Like,
wow.
Yeah. And it was like all in formaldehyde. I mean, it's all packaged and everything, so preserved. But where else was he going to keep it? The county didn't have like a morgue that they could, store it.
Yeah, like, this is the building where we keep legs.
This is the leg building. Arms over on 5th Street.
Yeah, it's over there. You have to take an Uber.
Yeah, exactly.
If you want to get arms.
Arms, that's a special trip. Sorry. We only do
legs are the trip.
Right. We only do arms on Tuesdays. You only get to see them on Tuesdays. So it was like so mortified. And she's like, finally she got it out of me that it was a leg. And she's like, I want to see, like, she was bent on seeing that leg. And I was like mortified and I did not want to see that leg. And finally, like she like crawled down the ladder to the floor and she was like, lifting the lid of the drum. And so I like crawled after her and like, yeah, we got it. We pried it open and we saw the leg. It was like, Stand By Me. We saw the leg.
That's an amazing childhood that, we all think that we have these like weird and embarrassing childhood stories and, I'm sorry, but you win. I don't care who you're telling stories to, you win. I mean, there's just no other option.
I don't know if that's a competition I want to win.
It's like, let's tell weird kid stories. Yeah. I'm sorry, we're not telling stories with Jennifer. We're going to have to wait until some other gathering.
Killed the party.
Yeah. I mean, that whole, you could win party games like crazy. But now that led you on to other things. So if you're helping, you said you had sisters, correct? That everybody kind of just part of that family business and growing up around that. And how did that then go on to shape everything that you've done since? And I know you've taught, correct? I mean, you taught high school, college, and then you've been to forensic training. You've done like 400 hours or something like that. I mean, lots like of forensic training.
Yeah, it was something like that. Whatever the school.
So you've had so much background that it makes perfect sense that you write what you write and that you are involved in helping consult with TV shows, especially now that CSI is a thing and that's like what everybody's into. And for me, this is a very fascinating conversation and background that you don't know. I'm from New Orleans. I live in Nashville. My brother is a cold case detective here in Tennessee. Wow. And so he is cold case, and I don't get to hear a lot about his work. He's one of those people that he's got little kids. He doesn't want to talk about it, leave the work at work,
Yep.
And so it's always been fascinating for me. My mom wanted to go into forensics as well, but, when she was younger and deciding on her career, she was told women don't do that. And so you need to find something else. Now, she will watch every forensic show out there. I mean, she's constantly watching these shows because this is truly what her passion is and what she wanted to do. So she gets to kind of live vicariously through my brother, I guess, because now he's out there doing what it is that she wanted to do. Wow. And so it's fascinating for me as somebody who almost grew up in that world because that was what my mom wanted to do. And then now my brother doing, investigating in cold cases. It's very interesting for me to hear your side of things and kind of how this has impacted your life and what you've gone through, knowing that similar experiences are out there for my brother as well and things that he's had to do as a detective, and knowing that it's people like you that help kind of. And I know you're involved in the Cold Case Foundation as well, correct? Am I right in that? Correct. And so helping to kind of get those resources to people like my brother who are working hard to bring justice to cases that, the families have not forgotten these victims, and neither should, the investigators. And sometimes it's just simply a lack of resources and manpower that can handle actually working those cases and continuing to work on those cases when there's so many new ones being thrown at them all the time.
Yeah.
So I know I'm grateful for your involvement in that and your passion for the Cold Case Foundation, just as somebody who has family in that field doing that very same thing. So taking your dad's work and what you grew up around and knowing that that's not normal for all kids to grow up that way, but it was normal for you. And that was, family passion and family business. And clearly it has impacted your choices and what you've tried to do with your life going forward. How did that kind of play out, I guess, as you kind of grow up and say, okay, what am I going to do with myself and my life? Becoming a coroner, that wasn't really your thing. So why not becoming a coroner like Dad? Why did you decide to take it a different direction? Clearly you had experience being a coroner. You could have.
Yeah, no kidding. First of all, like, thanks to your brother, who's really the real hero. Like, I just write about fictional heroes, but yeah, that's amazing. And I'm
pretty proud of him.
You should be. And I hope he maybe at some point can tap into the foundation, because that's what they're there for, because you're absolutely right. It's just simply a lack of time, money, person power. I hate saying manpower because of exactly what your mom went through, but person power, there's just not enough. And that's exactly why the Cold Case Foundation organized themselves. And they're growing, and their services are out there for free for law enforcement. And
that's awesome.
I hope, please call on the Cold Case Foundation, because the victim families don't forget, and nor should they. And anyways, I go on and on about that soapbox.
It's a good soapbox, and that's something that people don't always think about too. Yeah. And when we were watching the shows, the CSI shows and all these cold case shows, is that the victims' families are still out there and still wondering. And it's so important that those resources are available to continue to investigate those cases. And that is something that I think lots of people who are thriller fans and love those shows may not really think about the other side of it. We're used to seeing them solved and everybody's got some closure. There's so many families out there that don't have that.
So many. And I know that's exactly what it took me. I knew I wanted to support a cause eventually, like really make that part of my platform as a writer and speaker. And I'm so grateful that I found them. I really took my time, there's a lot of great resources, but it was a whole amazing providential story how I even found them. But I am grateful that I found them, because that is true. We watch this stuff and I write this stuff because it's entertainment and I'm passionate about it and it's exciting, and let's face it, it's a great market. It's a lucrative market to be in, and that's wonderful. But at the end of the day, there's thousands and thousands of real life people who are suffering because they've had loved ones ripped away. And even the people, even people like your brother who work on these cases, detectives and investigators, it affects them too. They don't want to just let that case go and move on to the next one. They want to solve every single one. They want no T uncrossed or I left undotted. I mean, so it affects the community.
It does, absolutely.
Especially when criminals and killers and other violent offenders go unchecked and uncaught and continue to wreak havoc in the world. So it's a huge cost. So anyways, I forgot. See, I'm back on my soapbox again. Anyhow.
Well, how did all of that, I've got my 1940s hair going today. I don't know what happened to this. Great. My hair curled all weird today. And it's every time I move it, I look like an Andrews sister ready to bust out Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy or something. It's kind of weird. Sorry, it's totally distracted me from
it.
What decade am I in? The writing, and clearly, when you started writing, you've got one of your books is The Coroner, and it's the first in the series. You've got 2 in that series. Am I right about that?
Right, and more coming.
More coming. Awesome.
Yes.
I love that. And I love that it was, the coroner, and it's a female coroner that is going out. So of course, my mom would love that. That's,
Yes, she will. She will.
Yes.
Breaks my heart, because it breaks my heart that was a thing for so long, that, because when I went through the Forensic Science Academy, I would say about 75%, maybe 60 to 75% of my instructors were female.
And that's amazing.
Yeah. And I would say probably at least 75% of our class was female.
That's
out of
awesome.
50 people. Yeah.
Well, it's so nice to see that has changed, and STEM is so embraced now for girls, and there's so much out there that is, we're encouraging girls to go into these science and math fields. And I know my middle child is very much STEM kid, and I love being able to encourage her to do that. And I think my mom is also such a great champion of that, because it was taken from her, and then she was discouraged from doing something that she would have been phenomenal at, because she absolutely loves it. And when you have a passion for something like that, then you're naturally going to, strive to excel in that. And so, just telling girls, girls don't do that. I'm glad that that's not really a thing anymore, that we just don't hear that as often. So, and I think that attention to detail, I think that compassion for the victims and the victim's family, that there's so much that women can contribute to this field. I mean, equally to the field, that it's great to know that there were that many that were in the academy with you and teaching.
Oh yeah.
Just to know that they're that involved. And your coroner is a female, and tell us a little bit more about her and kind of where this, obviously we know kind of where the story came from. It's that right what you know thing, which is awesome advice, right?
Might as well do it.
And not everybody has things to pull from like you do. So you had a unique pool of information.
Yeah. Well, circling back to your previous question, it's like, I always wanted to be a writer. Like I love science, and I love it a lot. But I knew from when I was a little kid, that's where I was supposed to be. I was a storyteller. And I think growing up the way I did, I didn't find it all that interesting or intriguing growing up, probably because it just was, and it was a job. And I saw what it did to my dad, and I saw it was an exhausting job. It's glamorized on TV and in books and things like that, but it's really
and they solve a crime in an hour. Solve a crime in an hour. By the end of the show, it's done.
Yeah, and honestly, we didn't have tons of crime, so it's a down and dirty, nasty job. Honestly, it's very interesting scientifically when you're trying to figure out how a person died and where they were shot from or stabbed or whatever. How did they drown? That part is very interesting, but I think I saw so much of my dad getting a call at 3 a.m. and having to go out in a snowstorm to investigate a suicide, or you name it. It wasn't that glamorous. And I was just like, I'm not doing that.
It's like, no, I don't want to go out in snowstorm.
But also it took me a very long time to connect my background to my writing life, because I did other things. I did public relations for a while. I worked in Chicago in social services and did public relations for them. And I taught college and high school, and I just did other things. I wanted to do other things. And I did journalism for a while, and then went into screenwriting. It was when I went into screenwriting that I started to connect my background to, and I'm getting to the corner, I promise, to my.
This is so interesting. Yeah. You just talk, girl. You just talk.
I promise I'm answering the question.
Who cares about my questions? Your stories. Just keep going.
So I was, trying, when you first start to really take yourself seriously as a writer, and I really ran from my calling for a good 10 or 12 years, where for whatever reason, I didn't think I could do it, or I didn't have the right training. Just name the excuses. We all get them. We all have them. Mm-hmm. I had every excuse in the book why not to do this job. And finally, I, came to a reckoning and started to really get the training and just made the click. Like, nope, I'm doing this. This is what I'm supposed to do. This is my calling. This is my passion. You're doing it. No, burn the bridges. You're done. And get the training. And I realized, moving to LA and starting to train with other writers and get into the industry and learn the film and TV industry, I was like, oh crap. This is a really competitive industry. I had no idea. Like it's easier to become a professional baseball player than to become a screenwriter, a produced screenwriter. And I was like, what? What have I done?
Statistically, those are some serious odds, but you've managed to do it.
But I managed to do it.
Do you think that your background helped you with that? That's not a background that everybody's going to have. If you're doing crime writing, there's a dime a dozen screenwriters out there, but they can't draw from experience like you can.
You know what? Here's the thing. It is not a business of meritocracy. Mm. It doesn't matter a lot of times what you've done or haven't done or what you bring to the table. It helps. It certainly helps. Or certainly maybe makes you stand up. Like if you were in the 10%, maybe now you're in the 5%, but it certainly doesn't guarantee anything because it's not a meritocracy. It's totally who you know and the relationship build, and then a bunch of luck sprinkled on it. Being at the right place at the right time. But I realized, though, at the beginning of all this, like 18 years ago or whenever I started really doing it seriously, that in order to get to that 5%, I had this amazing gift of my childhood and my background. And so I started to pour into that and really, and I'm going to use the word brand. It was a business, it was a personal decision and a decision of passion, but it was also a business decision because so you look at yourself, okay, oh gosh, I never thought about myself as a business or an entrepreneur. Like, what do I bring to the table that nobody else brings? How do I capitalize on that? How do I really funnel that into something that's unique? What I bring to the world. And that's how it all kind of gelled. And so I decided, you know what? I kind of ran away from this forensic stuff, but I really like it. So I went back to school and got more training and met a bunch of people in the field and started hanging out with them and learning and loving it. And then as my writing grew and I just started embracing it more, I guess, and being a part of more of those communities. And that's really how it happened. I didn't see it as this gift for a very long time. So.
Well, it's interesting that you say brand, and that's something that I know that's a word that we all writers are going, I don't want to be a brand. I'm a writer. I write because I love to write. Yeah. But in order to be, in order to get your books out there, in order to get your story into the hands of readers, you are responsible in a lot of ways for your own marketing. And you do have to find a way to, stand out in all of the noise of the book industry. So, how are you going to be heard? And finding your brand is definitely an important part of that. And to have something as unique to draw on as your childhood, which I guess I totally get that it was so normal for you that it didn't even seem like a thing to latch onto for a while. But, being able to actually recognize that is huge for you and to be able to say, all right, now I'm going to embrace this, something I pushed away for a long time, but, as like, weird kid stuff, weird stories, legs and 50-gallon drums. But, so then when you can embrace that, what a great way to actually start a conversation with people in the industry that you want to be in. And, then you become that person that kind of sticks in their brain because, oh, wait a minute, there was, what was the name of the girl that had the dad that was the point, it's like, oh, wait a minute, she knows her stuff. Yeah.
Well, yeah. And that's exactly. And that's the other part of it. And it's like, you really do need to know your stuff. And I was like, okay, I kind of know a lot about death investigation, but the rest of the forensic stuff, I've been out of that for a while. So it is about, keeping up with that. And it's not a challenge for me because I love it now. And it's, I I think you're right. Like it took me, I think with most writers too, like it took me a bit to embrace that branding, because I was like, oh, and I want to do this and I want to do this. And over the last few years, I've really had to be like, stay in your lane, Jennifer, stay in your lane. It's a good lane, but
it is a very good lane.
It's a good lane. It's a really fun lane. And so I've been very cognizant about just trying to stay in that lane. And I think,
but you didn't stay entirely in that lane, though, because from screenwriting to novel writing, you've merged a bit. You've crossed the yellow line.
Yes. I mean, like, I always wanted to try other genres, but I'll tell you why I went into the novel writing. And I'm so grateful I did screenwriting first, because it's made me a better novelist. But the novel writing came out, as most decisions in my life, came out of pure frustration and anger.
It's a great reason to do anything.
Great reason. It's a very motivating, highly motivating reason.
Oh yeah, very motivating. It's either go do something or open a bottle of wine. I mean, you really come to a crossroads when you get to that point.
Right, and I have a lot of quirks to prove that theory. Yeah, but it was like, you know, sometimes you're in a place and you know you're supposed to be there, but it feels stuck, or it's clogged. It's like, something was clogged. And I was in LA, I had been in LA for a long time. I had some moderate successes. I felt like I was getting better as a writer and getting more open doors, I guess. Because again, too, like in the screenwriting world, it's not a meritocracy at all. And it's very much about open doors and who you are meeting and what do they need, and being in the right place at the right time. And then, by the way, showing up with an amazing product.
Right.
That's just kind of like, that's the padding. Like, and she really can write. So, which surprised me and was starting to frustrate me, because I couldn't figure out how to get the more doors open, I guess is the best way to say it. And then I'd get frustrated and angry and discouraged. And I remember I was speaking at a conference. It was a book writing, like for authors. It was a novel writing conference, but I had been asked to come and do like a whole day long seminar on forensic science, like a boot camp for writers. A forensic science.
Fascinating to attend.
Fun. It was really fun, but they were all like novelists and stuff. And I remember before I went there thinking, and I'm getting to the corner, I promise. I have all these scripts, all these amazing, great we call them, spec scripts, practice scripts or whatever, that they're good stories. And the first one I ever did was The Corner. It was the first script I'd ever written. And I had rewritten that sucker probably 25 or 30 times, to the point where I was like, okay, I think this is it. Like, I think I got it now. But I remember I had that script in mind, and I was sitting there at the conference thinking, why don't I just turn it into a novel? Because why not? It's sitting there. It would make a great novel. And look how many projects on TV and in the movie theaters or streaming now are made from intellectual properties, books. A lot. I mean, I've been noticing now over the years, more and more and more, probably 80% or higher, because producers and studios are risk adverse. They don't want to risk on a property that's untested. But if you have
and especially now, I mean, I would think that it's only going to get more so, because they've taken such a financial hit over the last 6 months, and they're not going to risk anything that has no track record. I totally see this becoming even a bigger deal.
I agree. And I saw the writing on the wall years ago, thank God. And I switched at that point. I still was writing scripts all this time, but I really laid heavily into, I'm going to learn how to do this, because for one, again, it was a business decision. It was totally a business decision, and it was scary because I had never written a novel. But I figured I learned how to write a screenplay. I can write a novel. I can learn how to write it. I can learn how to do anything. So
You had the story. I mean, you had the bones of it. Not to use a forensic term, that was unintentional. Sorry about that.
That was perfect. Perfect. Yeah, I had worked this story 7 ways to Sunday. I knew everything about the characters in the background, and I'm like, all I need to do is flesh this out. See?
We can be punny when we talk about death.
That's right. Yeah. So I ended up at that conference, the blessed moderator, I had a host for my room, right? Who she kind of helped me with like my PowerPoint and whatever, handouts and whatever else. And she was a multi-published author, and she was so sweet. And she said to me at the end of the day, she's like, do you have an agent? Like, have you ever considered book publishing? I said, actually, no. And I was thinking that I might want to go down that road. And she's like, oh, let me introduce you to so-and-so. And it ended up being, so I'm like, great, sounds great. I'm so naive. I know nothing about the publishing world. All I know is LA and Hollywood, and they operate very differently.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
And so she introduced me, and it was literally like standing in line at Starbucks and like, hi, this is Jennifer. Hi, this is Julie. Oh, nice to meet you. Oh, we should be into this. She does this and she does that and blah, blah, blah. Okay, we should be just, okay, I got to get my plane. And then she left, and then we started connecting, and she became my agent. And 5 books later, here we are.
Wow. That's amazing. So I love the story that it started off as the script that just kind of was hovering in the background, waiting to become the full-fledged novel that it is, and a series, no less.
Yes. So, So I worked on it for about a year as a novel. It was awful. That first draft was not good.
Aren't they all, though? I think that's a requirement for a first draft. It's got to suck.
And I was just like, Julie, you have totally taken a chance on me because, But we kept reworking it, and she just believed in me, and we kept reworking it. And I sold. It wasn't the first book I sold, but it did get sold after about 2.5 years of us reworking and pitching and that sort of thing. And the rest is history. But to answer your other questions, that actual book / scripts / story was the first thing I worked on when I started screenwriting. And I don't know, I didn't think anything of it. It's just what sort of came to mind. And then my mentors were like, you pitch a bunch of ideas, right? Like they say, okay, come up with 50 ideas, go. And then you do that, and then you workshop it. And that was the one they were like, that's really interesting. Like, that's very sellable. You should work on that. And so I was like, okay. So that's literally how it happened.
Thanks.
Okay,
great. I needed that. I'm off and running then. Let's go with that.
Because it was just like I was practicing, so it didn't matter. But they were like, no, this story kind of like, it's interesting. It has a chance. So I'm like, well, I don't want to work on something that doesn't have a chance. So.
Right. I think that's all of it.
Yeah. And I just kind of got to thinking, like, even though I've never wanted to be a medical or a coroner, medical examiner or coroner, I like strong female characters. And I kept thinking about, what if it was this woman, and she's, she grew up like me, right? But then she left because there was some estrangement that happened, but now she has to come home, right? And she has to come back home to this small town where she grew up under this influence, and she's going to be, sort of be the second generation eventually down the line, a few books down the line or a few episodes down the line or whatever. She'll come back into this world, and I think it was because maybe part of it was because I was like, I wonder what would have happened if I'd actually followed in that path, even though I don't have any desire to actually be a medical examiner. I do find now, looking back at the work that my dad did, I do find it very interesting and understand, because it is an investigative puzzle. It was even deaths that weren't crimes were investigative puzzles, because you don't know all the time why people die. And those were some of actually the more interesting cases, ones that weren't crimes, that you're just trying to figure out, oh my gosh, how did this person die? How do we figure this out? It's not obvious at all. And those were, to me, that was kind of interesting, that exploring, even though I've never wanted to do the actual job, I love the idea of the puzzle, So
Yeah.
I get to do it fictionally, and then I don't have to like smell decomposition every day.
Right. You don't have to be around formaldehyde. Your skin doesn't go all weird from touching chemicals all day long. I mean, it's great. You can keep your manicure nice,
Exactly.
all of those things.
I know.
I love it. I love it. Now, you do a lot of other things too. I mean, you have done all the screenwriting, you've written, you lecture, you guest speak at places as well. You have webinars that you do. You're a very busy lady with all of those things and helping out with the Cold Case Foundation. So many great things. Guys, watching this, you've got to go to her website and check out all of the things that she's got on there. She does some amazing stuff. Great videos that are out there, webinars, all kinds of fascinating ways to learn about the forensic science field. And with a very charming host who knows her stuff. I mean, go check her out because she's got some great things out there. And you've gotten to speak at some really interesting events, lots of different places. I mean, everywhere from Sisters in Crime to, lots of other things. What is it about speaking? What are some of the things that people really want you to talk about when you come to speak to them?
A lot of the stuff we have been talking about, when they're there to learn, like if it's like, the last trip I took before COVID was to Sweden, and I talked to, it was really cool. Yeah. Sweden in February. Fabulous. And, it was, I know, it was really beautiful and, but cold. And, it was a group of students in their master's program in filmmaking. And I just did a couple days of crime writing. So a lot of it is just like, how do you craft a crime? How do you make it believable and authentic and thrilling and suspenseful and dramatic? And so that's one thing I love to talk about. And sometimes people want to know, like, how do I make sure my forensics is authentic? And so I like to talk to just about what myths and misconceptions that you see on television or in books, and what is the real
I know. Choking on myths and misconceptions. They don't want us to tell the truth.
That's right. So just talking about what is the real forensic science behind it, but also there are times we sort of have to fudge forensics. And so how do you do that well and gracefully? And sometimes. And
not get the whole forensics world mad at you when it airs.
Yeah, because I really do think that truth is stranger than fiction. And most times if I'm stuck and I'm trying to figure out, oh gosh, I don't know how to get out of this hole, that this corner or this hole that I've written myself into, when as soon as I start researching something, I'll find the answer. Because truth is stranger than fiction.
Very much so.
Way stranger. I remember one of the editors who read one of the first drafts of the corner, like once we sold it, and then it started going through the whole editing process. And one of the editors that I hired made a note. They make all the notes on the side. And, she made a note. I forget what the particular point was, but basically she's like, this doesn't sound plausible at all. This sounds like something that would not happen. And I was like,
that's the one real thing.
Really happened. Like, I lived that. Like, which just like, it made me laugh, but it also made me like, we're so used to the fake forensic stuff that we think it's real.
Yeah. And that's really the thing. It's where is the line?
Yeah.
And how do we know? And I guess that's kind of what you're out there to tell people as you're lecturing is, this is real and this is not. And this is how we make it believable.
Yeah. Or just read this. Just read this.
Yes.
This is all you need.
This. Forensic speak. Yes. There we go. We got it.
Is that good? Is that good? Okay.
Yep. That's good.
This was my project to graduate from the academy. I never intended to publish that. I just was doing it. What a
great thing to have, like right there in your hand, too.
Yeah, I was like, I just want this all in a book form. And so I wrote it for myself. And then my friends were like, we want that. You should publish that. I'm like, okay. So I found a publisher. Okay.
Well, I think that's a great tool for people to have in their hands when they're trying to write something authentically. And isn't that what it's all about? Is and I do the same thing. I write totally non-scientific stuff here. I write, murder that has to do with, voodoo and magic.
Yeah.
But I want that to be authentic as well. There's the Hollywood side of things, and then there's the way it really is. And, I've found in researching those traditions that the truth is truly stranger than fiction. And it's way better than anything that Hollywood has come up with.
Way better.
And I'd much rather tell that story and use that instead of what other people have, fantasized that, it should be this way. It's like, no, it's way better than you think.
Way better.
You actually dig in. And so you've given that resource to them, which is fantastic. Yeah. Speaking of voodoo,
yes,
Jennifer and I were comparing our dolls. We've brought friends today because it's just me and Jennifer on the show, and normally we have a crowd. So we have friends. I got my little voodoo doll down in New Orleans when I went down. And I brought it, of course, because there's bones, so I'm sharing this. And I love you. Introduce your friend, because your friend is fantastic. It doesn't have a name yet. I'm going to have to think of a truly Louisiana name for. I've made it a her. I feel like it's a her. I don't know, but
I can see that.
Maybe it's the jazzy feathers up there, and she's got like little feather feet down here.
Yeah, she's kind of got like a figure to her.
Yeah, she does. She's got her little hips and her waist going on here. So it's a her. I have to think of a name, but your guy has a name, doesn't he?
Yeah. So this is Sam, and I'll see if you can see the Sam.
Okay. Sam's toes.
Yeah, I know. Sam is dressed in. Oh, Sam's also got a little flower. Oh, wrong.
Oh, it's on the other side. Yeah, we're mirrored. It's so hard.
I know. Sorry. This is Sam, the skeleton, and he's wearing some of my old Barbie doll clothes. But Sam,
I love the Barbie doll clothes.
I know, right? Sam, actually, my one of my best friends from high school gave this to me, and it stayed with me ever since. It's kind of like my good luck talisman. But it represents the real skeleton Sam that lived in our home.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm. So we had a real skeleton, like an anatomical skeleton, but it was a real person that had lived. And it was a gift that my father got from a doctor. When that doctor retired, he bequeathed him Sam, because it was like a way to learn bones and to like remember anatomy. And so I remember I learned all my bones with Sam, like going through anatomy. And the funny thing we used Sam at a Halloween party one time.
Sam gets around.
Sam got around. Maybe it wasn't the most, what's the word? Honorable.
I think the real living Sam probably would have enjoyed his afterlife had he known about it. I mean, think about it. He's had new life breathed into his bones.
Yeah, but the one thing
Sam got to party. Come on. He didn't say that after they died.
He did get to party. The one thing my dad always did with Sam, he always made sure that there was a cigarette hanging out of his mouth.
I love it. Yeah. Your dad's awesome.
Because he's like, I want you girls to know that smoking kills.
It's the cigarette and the skeleton.
Sam died of lung cancer.
Oh,
he had a whole story. Sam had a whole story. Yeah.
Was it the true story, or was it one that just sort of grew over time?
Yeah, it just was legend. It was just our family legend. But Sam got another life when he was donated to our high school.
Oh, yeah. How cool.
To the science lab, yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. What a gift for them. What a gift. Well, speaking of legends, we're going to veer off a little while into our New Orleans history and mystery section of the show. And I'm going to tell you the story of an unsolved crime there. The unsolved mystery of the Axeman of New Orleans. Now, the Axeman of New Orleans, he started his spree back in 1918. And they call them the canonical 12. So there were 12 victims of the Axemen. 6 lived, 6 died. Mm. The Axeman would come through a small part of the door. They had the wooden panels in the doors. And he would pry one of the back door panels off so that he could get through the hole. And he would attack his victims in their sleep. And he would almost always use their own axe on them. So he would find their axe outside, and he was pretty brazen about this. He'd leave the murder weapon. So in 1918, we don't have, all of the labs and everything where, they could say, oh, here's the murder weapon, go get the fingerprints. Couldn't do that. So it was just more his serial killer kind of calling card. I'm going to leave the weapon behind. And so the legend of the Axeman grew. And so he tended to focus on Italian business owners. And this was the only thing that anybody really had to go on, because the attacks seemed fairly random. Never really understood, the connections to each other than the fact that they were Italian business owners. And then the theory became, well, maybe it's mob related and the Italian mafia. And that would have been a good theory, except that these people led very modest lives. So they weren't necessarily, mob money that had, gone wrong somewhere. So it became more of a serial killer case than anything else, because no one could find any ties that went with any of this. They arrested a few people kind of along the way. Alibis either checked out, or victims kind of recanted their story that it wasn't the people they thought it was. One of the victims, let's see, we'll read about a couple of these folks here. The first ones that were attacked was the Maggia. Joseph Maggia and his wife Catherine were the first victims of the Axeman. He slashed their necks with a razor and then continued to beat them about their heads with the axe. Catherine was nearly decapitated and died immediately. Joseph, the husband, lingered for 3 days. And his brother his brothers heard moaning coming from the home. He did die not long after he was found, but the brothers did find him. And then Louis Bessemer and his mistress, Annie Lowe, were nearly beaten to death. And they were discovered when a man delivering bread for Louis's grocery Louis didn't show up for the delivery. And Louis was injured but lucid. Annie was knocked unconscious. Louis claimed that a stranger came and broke into their home and beat him and Annie with a hatchet. Police did find the hatchet in the bathtub. Louis recovered, but Annie died. None of them, and it continues on several different groups of people, different individual people. Anna Schneider, she died. She was, no, she didn't die. She was nearly beaten to death. She was 8 months pregnant, and she ended up delivering her daughter 3 days after the attack. But the people who did live through this, who could talk about it, were almost immediately knocked out. And so he attacked in the night. And of course, in 1918, there was not as much, ambient light around. He didn't have the street lights, they went off at a certain time. There was, not a lot of light inside the houses or anything. And so anybody that attacked, they weren't going to get a good look at this guy. Mm-hmm. And if he was going to attack them and beat them up and, try to actually kill them, then they didn't have a whole lot as far as just, their own evidence, their own testimonial evidence to give anybody investigating the case. And they never could find any trace of this guy. So he left the murder weapon behind. It's not like they could find the murder weapon at somebody's house. It's like, here's this bloody axe this guy tried to hide. There was none of that. The axe was there, but they didn't have any way to fingerprint it or anything like that and track this guy down. So it goes on for a long time. So 12 people have been attacked. A 2-year-old child was killed. I mean, he just was random and brutal in his attacks. But he was really building up a reputation for himself. And apparently, the legend was as entertaining to him as anything else that he was doing. And so the legend of the Axeman really grew when he published a letter in the newspaper. And we get the legend of the Axeman's Jazz from this. And there's actually a book called The Axeman's Jazz that comes from this. So the letter, and there's a little excerpt in here from the letter, but you can actually find the entire letter that he wrote. He claims to be, here it is. Here we go. So police were very, heavy police presence and all of that. And so after the assault on Ann Schneider, the Axeman sends a letter to the local paper who publishes it, where he claims to be a spirit and a demon, and that he has decided that next Tuesday, and he names the day, at 12:15 a.m. earthly time, he is going to come through the city, and he will pass by and not harm anyone who is playing jazz. And so the people of New Orleans spend every last penny they have and use whatever they can scrape together to buy victrolas, to hire bands, and all of this stuff. It is like some demonic Passover that is happening in the city of New Orleans. And so all night long, they are blasting jazz music all through the city of New Orleans, hoping to be passed over by the Axeman of New Orleans. And no one was killed that night. So apparently they appeased the Axeman, who then just sort of mysteriously stopped killing people. There were no more murders. There were a couple that were much later on that they attributed more as a copycat than the Axeman actually coming back. A couple of people actually confessed to it. One in particular who confessed to it, but then, nothing could actually ever be proven that he had anything to do with it. He was in Tacoma. I mean, he was totally very far away. He's just kind of a homeless guy that just got arrested for some other killing. And so he decided he was going to take the Axeman's claims and, go down big if he was going to go down. Turned out he didn't have anything to do with it either. So after several arrests and several releases, to this day, the killing spree of the Axeman of New Orleans from 1918 is still an unsolved crime. They have no idea who killed all of those Italian grocers and their wives and children in the city of New Orleans in 1918. So unsolved mystery and the legend of the Axeman and the Axeman's jazz, which actually there's a piece of jazz music that was written called The Axeman's Jazz. And there's a book about the Axeman and the investigations called The Axeman's Jazz, because the Axeman stated very plainly that he likes jazz. So that is our New Orleans history and mystery. So if we're talking about unsolved crimes and cold cases, the canonical 12 remains cold cases to this day that no one has ever been able to solve. So
did he kill all those people just in that 1 year? Oh, 19? Oh, wow.
Yep.
I love
that 1 year. In 1 year. So he went on a rampage, and generally coming in through the panel of the door. And some of the victims' reports didn't make any sense, because one of the victims said that they saw a very large man leaving the scene, but he could not have been large if he came through that small panel in the door. So that didn't check out. There was a lot of people that were arrested just for no real reason. And so they had to let a lot of them go because there just really wasn't anything to tie them to the crime. And so they never actually solved it. But that was 1918 in New Orleans. It was the year of the Axeman.
Wow. Well, we should be maybe grateful that all we have is COVID.
They had the Axeman. I mean, I don't know. Literally busting into their homes, killing them in the sleep. Yeah. I know. I mean, so many of these people that were just various ages, and one of the people who was attacked, the one who had the 2-year-old child that was killed by the Axeman, when the husband came in, she was standing there just bloody and just horribly beaten, and she's holding their little girl. And I mean, the little girl was dead. She recovered, but mentally was never the same. Yeah. I mean, anything she had seen, she was not going to be able to testify or give any. I mean, she was mentally broken. She physically healed, but mentally broken by that. So horrible, horrible time. But the legend of the Axeman lives today in New Orleans, because no one was ever able to solve that year-long killing spree in New Orleans. Right. So and crazy stuff.
Right. I love the twist with the jazz, and then it stopped after that. And hey, he's got good taste, jazz. Okay, well,
I'm telling you, he picked a great city and great music. So what else are you gonna do? I mean, That's all you can do. Now, we're going to have a little fun. I'm going to make you play a little game with me. This is our Louisiana lagniappe, which means a little something extra. So we're going to talk about a little something extra, and we're going to tie it to some of our conversation today. But now, television detectives. And so these are the three you get to choose from. All right. So you have to solve a mystery with one of the following detectives. So who do you choose and why? Is it Jessica Fletcher for Murder, She Wrote? Sherlock, and you can choose any incarnation. I happen to like Benedict Cumberbatch. Or are you solving a crime with the Scooby Gang? What's your choice and why? Jessica Fletcher, clearly writing murder mysteries and solving murder mysteries, kind of seems like a parallel here. But then there's Sherlock, who gets into the science of things. And there was even the episode of Sherlock where he had a body part in the fridge. And of course, Watson's like, really, Sherlock? And then there's the Scooby Gang.
I know.
Scooby Gang.
Scooby. Man.
So I intentionally made this a tough choice on you.
This is a tough choice, but I think I'm going to have to go with the Scooby Gang.
I like that choice. So why in particular the Scooby Gang? What is it about the Scooby Gang that makes them fun to solve a mystery with?
I like that there's so many of them and they all have a different perspective, right? And they all bring their different perspective to, and it's just plain campy. I mean, when you spend all day like researching serious things or like writing serious things, like I just like comedy. I like comedy and murder combined. Comedy and crime combined. So
Deborah says pick Sherlock, and I love me some Sherlock Holmes. Let me tell you, I love the Sherlock series, and I'd do just about anything for Benedict Cumberbatch.
Yeah, that might be my pick.
If it was that one or Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock, I got to tell you, either one of those. But
that's a pretty good one. He makes it pretty comical.
He does make it funny, and I think that's why I particularly like his, is because he's very funny. Benedict Cumberbatch is just like he's just almost manic in his the scientific way that he's looking at things, and I love the thought process that we get with that character. So that was more the production of the show that's really letting us in his head to see all of that, as opposed to just like the Sherlock Holmes stories. It's like he always knows something nobody else got, but I kind of like that the Sherlock series actually let us see that thought process. Yeah. But Robert Downey Jr. too, man, Sherlock something else. But I'm with you too. I don't know that I could pass up a ride in the Mystery Machine. I mean, gotta go in the Mystery Machine. And to feed Scooby some Scooby snacks, and I don't know. Shaggy just always seemed like, somebody who'd be really cool just to go, hang out and get a burger with, maybe. I don't see him really as a major asset to that team.
I don't know that any of them really were. But I also...
No.
Maybe Daphne. I don't know. But
it was really, gosh, it was really kind of funny how they all sort of stumbled into finding it.
I think it was I think it was Scooby that might have solved most of them.
Most of them. Yeah. I mean, just kind of, inadvertently. Velma was pretty good. I mean, she usually was, at least somewhat the brains of the operation.
I always liked that there was like this they just pulled out all the stops with like weird supernatural, like there was always ghosts. So, like I don't know, just like really like
yes. And then it was like, those meddling kids, and so they unmasked somebody who'd been flying around earlier in the episode. It's like, how could it have been the janitor? Because he's like flying around. Oh, Deborah says that the Scooby Gang would make anybody look like a genius. Yes, Deborah, I believe you're exactly right on that one. Oh, gosh. Hi, Tammy Bell, who's popped in. Love seeing everybody here tonight. So we have to come up with a name for this little lady here, and you know, who's going to be Sam's new friend, because I'm totally a fan of Sam's now. I love Sam's story.
Thank you.
He's the best. Look at him in his Barbie clothes. I love the Barbie clothes. It's like the best touch ever.
Which my grandmother made these, by the way. Yeah.
I love the vintage fabric. I was like, those are the coolest Barbie clothes ever.
He's got it going on.
He totally does. He totally does. So Annie would totally kill me if I don't at least tell you guys, remind you guys that Crescent City Sin, the sequel to Crescent City Moon, is out now. Kindle pre-orders will drop tomorrow on its official launch day. And tomorrow for our Wednesday edition of the Second Line show, we're going to tell some ghost stories and have a launch party for Crescent City Sin. So join us tomorrow night as well. Annie always says I don't talk enough about my own books. So there you go, Annie. I did it.
And congratulations. That's a big deal.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And speaking of books, you guys need to check out all of the books that Jennifer has out there. The Coroner and Secret Remains, which is the sequel to that series, and the new one that is out, Hole in the Woods. The trailer that you have got on your website of just her running through the woods is so creepy. I love it.
It's haunting.
It was really haunting. I absolutely love that. So you guys absolutely go to Jennifer's website, jennifergraeserdornbush.com. Check her out, because there's some great stuff on that site for you to get to know her a little bit more, some great insight into what she's working on, what she's writing. You can get her books there as well. Make sure that you go and take a look around, because it's just a great place to spend some time and learn some really fascinating stuff about the world of forensics, and some great books. And so we are going to be wrapping up. You guys have spent, such a great time hanging out with us. So we are absolutely, JenniferDornbush.com. I said the Graeser in there. So it's JenniferDornbush.com.
I didn't even hear it. Yeah.
JenniferDornbush.com. So make sure that you guys are checking that out. And if you want to go back through and listen to any of those wild stories in Jennifer's childhood, this particular episode is going to live on YouTube, like you guys know by now, but spread the word on Nola Nash Entertainment on YouTube, where you can watch this episode as well as all the other past episodes of the Second Line show. It is there for you. Be sure to tune in tomorrow night as well, as we are going to be telling some fun ghost stories. We're going to dress up. I've got some more ghost stories for you. Some of those ghost stories that have to do with my recent trip to New Orleans. So some of those ghost stories happened to me, and it was so much fun. I loved it. I got to stay at a haunted hotel at the Lafitte Guest House. And yes, we had some encounters at the Lafitte Guest House. Super fun. Got to talk to a couple of ghosts, a chandelier that decided to take on a life of its own, and some other things. So absolutely some fun stuff coming up for tomorrow night's kind of Halloween party and book launch. So fun things. Make sure you're tuning in tomorrow, same time, same places as today. So guys, thank you so much for hanging out. Make sure you check out Jennifer and all of her great books, and we shall see you soon. Have a great night.